particularly supported by Cal and Washington. And so there are tens of millions of dollars of impact of if they were to even consider moving a conference, that, this stuff is just kind of a rounding error.
So Tony, I have a question for you.
$5 million is not a rounding error. I think that's unfair.
And again, it's not just about
the $9.3 billion budget.
Well, hold on. I think what Josh is getting at was the question that I was wanting to ask, which is when you're talking about the $5 million versus $9.3 billion, how readily, let's say that the media deal comes out and it's $4 million less, how easily can the University of Washington, which does have a big endowment and does have a big operating budget and whatnot, move dollars around to make up that gap compared to?
Let me tell you how readily available that is. Not at all. One thing doesn't have anything to do with the other, Tony. One thing has nothing to do with the other. And you'll notice that, let me show you how he answers this. Welcome back to a special edition of the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast, a collaboration with my orange-wearing co-host here for today, Mr. Cody Stovall, Locked On Oklahoma State. Welcome back to the show, Cody.
What's up, brother, man? Hey, dude, I gotta give you props. You had me over here vibing to your intro,
whenever
man.
I started that intro was that I saw you over there doing the jam and just oh man. Well, folks, if you love college football, you are definitely in the right place. So before you forget, whether you're on my channel or on Cody's, make sure that you smash that red subscriber button, like our videos, and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss one moment of the Hall of Fame College Football or Locked On Oklahoma State podcast. So, Cody, we're going to talk a little bit today.
Yeah, boy.
I thought we should come on here, talk a little bit about the big debate last night, the big debate. You had a couple of your boys from Locked On, one from the Pac-12, one from the Big 12. And then, of course, you had a buddy of both of ours, Justin from Couz's corner, along with a buddy of neither of ours, Tony Altimore, that good old Pac-12 homer. They were talking who lives, who dies, blah, blah, blah. It's just more, this is...
Well, they were talking.
Yeah, they were talking. So essentially the debate was over who lives, who dies, who, I guess, if you want to put it that way. To be honest with you, this entire debate format was a little weird to me. And I'm going to start off this by saying, and it's just a lot of disingenuous talk from the Pac-12 side of it. And I understand wanting to preserve the conference. And this is something that I've said earlier to you as well, is that, look, I don't have a dog in this fight anymore. I'm an Oklahoma guy. My show is centered around Oklahoma and national, but I am a national college football show, okay? But I don't have to care about the Big 12. I don't have to care about the Pac-12 because my guys are going to be in the SEC. So you are fairly outspoken about this whole thing, and I understand that. Talk to me about what it is that, we'll get into the video. We'll kind of break down some of it, but talk to me about what it is about this that you're seeing and what, just where you are on it.
Well, I think one of the biggest things is you mentioned that they were going to discuss solutions as opposed to anything else, correct?
Opinions, whatever.
But I think the debate that they had, and any debate, unfortunately, that you dive into with Pac-12 people, it always equals the same thing, and it's the disillusion ideas that they have of their conference. It really is honestly mind-blowing. Like, I did think it was posturing for quite some time. I thought Pac-12 people were just kind of trying to throw shade at the Big 12 whenever they could. But as time has gone on and they have more and more opportunities ripped away from them, you do not see this moment of realization. You cannot find a solution until you acknowledge that there's a problem. And nobody in the Pac-12 media is acknowledging their problem. Everybody's continuing. And our buddy, Josh Neighbors, my buddy, he did say something that I thought was of note. It was a fun little reference, right, when he said something to the effect of, it's kind of like when the house is burning down and you throw a blindfold on and you tell yourself, well, the fire department might get here before my house burns down. That's how the Pac-12 is acting in all of this. And it really just, I don't get it. It's not posturing.
Right.
It's not. They firmly believe this stuff. They firmly believe that however many 4.0 students they have means that they can circumvent the athletic budget. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, and I think that's where the whole,
right.
I think it started off, first and foremost, it started off poorly because the rules being, they started off that they're essentially going to be talking about whether or not should Pac-12 teams leave for the Big 12 or vice versa, which to that, I would say if the Big 12 teams were going to leave to the Pac-12, they would have done that 2 years ago when Texas and Oklahoma made the decision to go to the SEC. And the bidding was there. They could have pulled Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. They could have pulled Baylor. They could have pulled TCU. There was a few other ones that I know they were speaking about. Not to mention Houston, Kansas State, some of these, Kansas even possibly. I get it, right? So there was these options there. And they turned their nose up at it, just like they've continually turned their nose up at the idea of going to the Big 12 now that it appears, from all intents and purposes, that there's really nothing left for the Pac-12 to hang around for. Now, whether or not you feel like this is dead, and the first thing I would say is, because I don't have the dog in that fight, I've never been under the impression that I wanted any of these conferences to die, because I'll be honest with you, as much as I'm excited about Oklahoma being in the SEC to an extent, there's a part of me that says, I don't know that any of this is worth where we're headed. And what we lose as college football, from college football, like, for instance, our teams playing each other on a yearly basis. We may not ever play each other again for all we know, right? As far as football is concerned, I'm guessing that they're going to play each other in other sports.
Dude, I find that unlikely that we don't ever play again, but at least for the next
we're talking about a while, right? And at the very least, we've talked about that before, but in the end, what are you're losing a lot with this. And then the fact that, you start thinking about, I've done some stuff about the ACC and things like that, man, and it looks so bad for their conference because of the fact that they're locked in until 2036 unless they go to court and do all this stuff. And by then, shit, what is it? The discrepancy in money now is huge. What's it going to be in freaking 12 years? Right. So,
well, that's the difference. The Pac-12 is operating on sand, both figuratively and physically. Meanwhile, Brett Yormark has laid down a very good concrete jungle of a foundation. And so it just, again, the disillusionment, you mentioned the ACC. They understand the predicament they're in, which is why they're not out there saying a bunch of crazy stuff. But that's the thing, is George Kliavkoff cannot prevent himself from saying crazy stuff. And now he's decided to do what? The exact opposite. He's put his foot in his mouth so often that he's decided to stay
But now
silent.
you have guys like Tony Altimore talking for you, and that's not a good thing either.
Yeah. Well, and they're acting like it's a good thing, right? A lot of Pac-12 punditry at the moment is legitimately trying to sales pitch people on silence is golden. We turned down all of this money. We've turned down all of these deals. We've gotten ESPN and Fox to completely shun us, but we got everybody right where we want them. This is what you continue to hear. And this fallacy that the Pac-12 can continue to find legitimacy, to me, every day that this goes by without them having any semblance of legitimacy, it's not good for them.
I would agree. And I'm going to say, first off, I wasn't excited about their little rules. They were talking about, let's not make predictions or, say what's going to happen. Let's talk about, obviously we were saying, let's talk about solutions. Right away, that gets broken. Then you get McLaughlin. He's going to start dismissing this idea of the four corners. We're going to run through some of these things, but I'm just going to pop through this video. We'll stop it as needed. Hey, when you want to stop it, tell me to stop it. We'll talk about it, okay?
It's easy, brother.
All right. So obviously here we are, no personal predictions. What will the school leaders do? What should they do? They're talking about no anonymous sources, stuff like that, which is funny to me in view of the fact that that your boy doesn't even have any sources. It's just all his little colorful charts that he likes to pop up there.
He's good at making charts, man.
I don't know where he gets this information because he doesn't even really source it. I don't know if it's coming from Google or whatever, but as you're going to see as we go along, it's just a bunch of silly talk. Now, we'll get back into it, but I just want
Now, we're going to talk tonight a little bit differently because one of the things we're not going to do is we're not making predictions. We're going to be making recommendations. And that goes for you guys in the chat, too. We want to hear your recommendations. What do you think teams should do? It's not about what is going to happen. It's about what you guys think and what everybody here on the panel thinks should happen. Now, just a quick refresher for those folks that are new to history. This is actually the 8th time that these two conferences have
both, because I just don't know what or somewhere in there. So if you're talking about a deal that's $4 million less, that might only be, or $4 million more in the Big 12, that might only net like $2 million for an athletic department. And look, a school that doesn't have as much money, neither of the Arizona schools are notoriously flush with cash. Maybe they would see that as something that they should do, but I don't see that benefit being really, really great for them on the athletics front. Arizona, maybe for basketball, sure, but I think with the 12-team playoff coming, I think that kind of reinforces that it's not that appealing of an option in my view to go to the Big 12, because I just don't know what dramatically changes if you go over there.
All right, we can stop there.
Money?
Yeah. So what dramatically changes there? If you're by being in the Big 12 instead of the Pac-12, the Pac-12 that doesn't have a deal has missed its deadline to have a deal multiple times. Yes.
On purpose.
Yeah.
On purpose.
They had the deal that the Big 12 ended up with in their exclusive window a year ago. And they turned it down. They postured at it that they were expecting $40 million or more. You heard Kliavkoff.
Oh, they wanted Big Ten money.
Yeah, they were thinking that that's where they were. And obviously, whenever you don't have USC and UCLA in the fold, it was never going to be Big Ten money. Number one. Number two, it certainly wasn't.
Yeah, but dude,
Go ahead.
As soon as they left, as soon as USC and UCLA left, did the Pac-12 do anything? No. They continued sitting on their hands, acting like Oregon and Washington were going to eat up the loss of USC,
and
UCLA.
That's the whole point. So now where you're at, and this is what they're talking about. So automatically, you know, it kind of gets off on the wrong foot because first off, I feel like he's allowing, I don't know what Mark's even there for, to be honest with you, because he's not posing the questions. He's not moderating this thing. He says he is, but he's not. And so therefore it goes on. One of the debaters is going to be in there kind of running the show. And he starts talking about how, you know, does this matter? Well, immediately you get to McLaughlin saying that essentially, no, you know, they notoriously, they're not flush with cash. But right away, it's into this part that this is going to be the theme of this show, is the fact that none of this has to do with athletic conference money that you're going to get from the athletic conference. There's a lot of this stuff, and this is going to be, you're going to see a theme of this throughout. And in fact, folks, we're going to put the link to this show, even though, you know, it's not one of one of my partner shows whatsoever. I know it isn't the same with Cody, but we're going to put that in there. You guys go ahead and go in, let us know what you think about it. But here's my thoughts. The bottom line is that this is an ongoing theme, that it's a lot of disinformation, look over here stuff, smoke and mirrors, because a lot of this money has zero to do with, none of the money that they're talking about would ever be shared with the athletic department at any of these schools. And the fact that that all his charts are built around this and all this stuff that he talks about, it just lets you know what kind of situation that these guys are truly in at the Pac-12. I understand not wanting to lose your conference, lying about it, and you're going to see later dissing. I mean, we're talking about guys that have built a reputation as journalists and strong journalists, and that you're ripping apart their quote unquote integrity is not okay. And doing so in a disingenuous way is what really bothers me about it. It's not about whether or not, I don't care who lives or dies. What I don't like is, I've been a journalist for a long time, and I don't like that kind of stuff. Don't be lying about it, you know? I don't know.
Well, my question is, what do they gain? Right? If you're a Pac-12 media individual, right, and you're covering the same thing as all the other Pac-12 media individuals, and that same thing is, we're fine. Don't listen to everything you're hearing. Don't worry about the numbers. We're fine here in Pac-12 country. I just, what do they gain
in the end,
by saying all this?
It's going to be, the truth comes out at some point, does it not?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And when that happens, and you've spent months and months and months and months saying the Pac-12's fine, Pac-12's fine, Pac-12's fine, and then you find out, we're not fine. What happens then? How does your credibility continue to work in your favor after that?
Your credibility is just imploding. I've got a little short that I put up there on my channel about imploding credibility. It hadn't gotten a lot of love, but you should go check it out. It'll be in here and there. But no, I was telling the audience. All right, so let's go on to the next thing. But again, talking about acting like none of this matters to a school like Arizona or Arizona State because they don't make that much money. So where do you gain from it? Well, you gain from it because you would make money for your program, and you could increase and the whole biggest thing about this isn't even money as much as it is visibility, isn't it? Exposure.
Well, I would argue that the most important factor that a lot of people aren't talking about is stability.
Yes. But in the stability being that you're visible, that you're, that your recruits and I mean, Couz said something on there that, basketball and football is your front porch of your university. It's how you welcome people to your university. So
100%.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So anyway, let's move on. We'll continue.
Well, I mean, before you click back in real quick, one thing I will say about segment one that I think, I mean, you do what you want. I don't know that watching a bunch of segment one is going to be all that important because there is no way physically possible that the Pac-12 right now gets to within $5 million of the Big 12.
So segment one.
So it's just like they're starting there. Why are we starting there?
And even
that's not even.
I get it. And so it seems a lot to do about nothing, is what you're saying. This is the reason I'm going to put the reason I have it in there is so that we can highlight that. This is the point is I'm not trying to take a side so much as I want it to be known that how do you go one way with it when it's completely not that way? And I really want to show how Neighbors and Couz really kind of combat it. So, more than anything. So that's kind of the reason we were there.
There's not much reason to leave, although future speculation about, hey, what is the next team?
Then I think it's not going to work. If it's 50-50 or even 60-40, maybe you stay if you're within 5 million. But if you're getting up to 70-80% streaming, then I'm not sure they would be able to, I don't think the exposure would allow them to stay in the Pac-12 and continue to get the national recognition they need as a program and to compete at the national level as a Power 5 school.
Or even the Arizona
level as a Power 5 school. They need to be on linear television for at least the next 3 to 4 years.
Well, I think that kind of depends on which program you're talking about. Because like Washington State and Oregon State don't have, national championship, or even the Arizona schools, frankly, are not in a place where or Colorado or even Cal at this point don't have, the ability to say like, we're just a couple of years away from being, a perennial top 10 team. Like they're much longer builds on that front, much like Utah has been in the Pac-12 since they joined in 2011 and are just now 2-time defending champions. They've been to 4 straight Pac-12 championship games and like actual full seasons there. But I don't know if that element of it, like having a few more games on streaming versus linear, I'm not sure that radically shifts their calculus for how they feel they can continue to be competitive.
All right. Now, first and foremost, he's saying, quote unquote, a few more games on linear versus streaming. The last deal that we've seen that has been offered out there, okay, and we won't even get into the ESPN report yet. We'll wait on that. But the last deal that we've seen out there has been all Apple. It would be an 80-20 deal where 80% streaming, 20% linear component, which they would somehow, I guess, lease it to ESPN, Fox, whoever, right?
Or maybe is the CW still in the conversation?
Like,
is that a hard choice? Do you want to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Utah
I don't know. And that's I agree. But the thing is no matter what you look at, okay, so significantly more, because here's the difference. It's completely opposite. You have a 75 at least % chance of being on linear television in the Big 12, right? It's the opposite of that in the Pac-12 under the current deal that they now obviously they haven't accepted that deal, but there's not exactly a bunch of people out there offering them anything different. So first and foremost, McLaughlin's sitting there acting as if that's all it is one thing. The other part that I felt like was, okay, if you're going to, let's say, if they were to stay together and they wanted to keep this. Now, if you are Oregon and Washington and you are driving the boat now, right? Per se, that's what they act like anyway.
Yeah.
That they're the big TV draw. Now, I would argue that Colorado is going to be a TV draw, no matter what. But let's just say, if Oregon and Washington are going to demand, say, unequal revenue share, right? Which that always goes well. Are the Ducks and Huskies essentially the biggest media draws left? Now, he sat there and acted like Washington State, Oregon State, plus, the Arizona schools, they're nowhere close. And even Colorado, he added in there, are nowhere close to competing on the level of those other schools. And therefore, they should just sacrifice for the rest of the conference If you are a player at one of those schools, or you're an administrator or a coach or anybody else at one of those schools, how do you like hearing that, Cody?
It adds more fuel to the fire when you talk about, right, some of the quote unquote slip ups we have heard from, like, the Arizona AD, Colorado. I know the Colorado AD publicly says some things and privately says other things, but again, that's what this does. That's exactly what this does, because you're basically saying, well, those four corner schools shouldn't go to the Big 12 because the Big 12 is horrendous, and they're better off competing for last place in the Pac-12 for way less
and
money.
not get, and you know what, they can be okay with unequal revenue at that, or not even in, or not being on television as much because they're not as good. Here's the deal: wherever you're not as good right now, if you, first off, the money's going to hurt enough. Secondly, the exposure part is what really hurts you. If you are not competing today and you stick in the Pac-12, then what? Because now everything's going to be on Apple. The only way you get seen is on Apple. And that's behind a paywall, by the way. If it's anything like, like MLS, that's behind a paywall. So, I mean, to me, you're basically saying, okay, yeah, we're okay with staying at the bottom of the pack instead of having an opportunity just like the rest of the conference in the Big 12. We have the same opportunity. We're going to make the same amount of money. You know, maybe it's a little less if Fox weren't to get in, and we won't want to get into the prorated stuff just yet. That's coming up. But what I would tell you is that all this talk about unequal revenue versus or unequal amount of time on television, 20% equates to one football game a week. One. That's going to be on at 7:30 Pacific time, which is 10:30 on the East Coast. You're not getting looked at. And you're what? You're going to do Oregon and Washington every week?
How often are UCLA and USC going to eat that window up this year?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they're going to. You think they're not going to get the last of their freaking money out of USC and UCLA? They're going to squeeze that thing dry? You know they are. Yep. All right. So we'll continue.
Their programs going forward.
Oh my goodness.
But the Oregon-Washington thing, I know the Oregon-Washington thing is a rumor, so I'm not going to get on that too much. But if there are schools in that conference that don't want to sign a grant of rights deal, that could also change this. That changes the conversation as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, but if they're not going to sign for the PAC, I don't know what, like, I don't think they have as many options as they would maybe like to have, because if you're gonna try and play hardball with the Pac-12, you can't go in there and be bluffing, because then you're left in a position of no leverage whatsoever. And I
mean, what were they kick Oregon and Washington out of the conference?
No, I know, but I'm saying if you're trying to, I don't know, get unequal revenue sharing, for instance, and
which Oregon and Washington should try to do, by the way. That
right.
should be the
and I understand why, because they're clearly the biggest remaining television draws in the conference, and the numbers have borne that out since about 2015 or so. But what is kind of I don't know that there's an or, like, give us unequal revenue sharing, or like do you feel like they have one right now? Because I think the Big Ten's made it clear that they're not gonna keep going. Made it clear that they're not gonna keep going.
The other thing, by the way, that I think is kind of interesting in this debate, which happens a lot, is people talk about, like, Washington and Oregon like they're these, like, hypothetical things. Washington is chairman of the conference, right? So, like, when people are like, oh, I don't think Washington will agree, Washington is the chairman, putting it in front of everybody else. So, like, there's no such thing as Washington won't agree, because Washington's putting it in front of everybody else. So there is no such idea as Washington won't agree to the grant of rights, because Washington is creating the grant of, like, Washington is the chairman. One of the big differences between the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and this is actually goes back to the 50s, ties to the Ivy League, problems with the Big Ten, all that, is that in the Pac-12, the presidents run the show. The commissioner doesn't run the show. I don't know.
In the Pac-12, the presidents run the show. The commissioner doesn't. Tony?
Yeah, they just paid George Kliavkoff to say crazy
so
stuff.
here's
I
the deal. He's right that the Pac-12, the presidents certainly run the show. Guess what? They run the show in the Big 12 too. The difference between the two, it's not what he's saying. The difference is this. And I would tell you that probably the most powerful commissioner is definitely Sankey, right? Because everything he touches turns to gold, it seems like. But he ain't in charge of the SEC either. All right, he's not. Right. Here's the difference between Kliavkoff and Yormark. Yormark has shown an ability to be able to persuade different factions and different folks to work together. For instance, look how close it was to Oklahoma and Texas staying for another year and not making, and the rest of those 8 teams not making anything off of them when they left, because they weren't going to make anything off of them when they left. And what did and that was where they were. If you'd left it up to those presidents, and I don't care which one it was, who it was. I've got my ideas about who it was. I don't care. Bottom line was they were about to stay another year. They weren't happy about it. Neither was the rest of the conference, but that was how it was going to be. What did Yormark do? Hold on, folks. Hold on.
Used it as
he
leverage.
Said, look, we got to do this, and we need to make something out of these guys, or else this is just one last year, and they walk away for free. And he was able to get $50 million from each, $100 million to both pay off what Fox felt like it needed and to make, quote, the rest of the 8 whole, or be able to offer it up to strengthen the conference, correct?
Right.
That shit wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen if it had been what it was one week as what it was the next week was different. And why? It wasn't because he was in charge of anything. It was because he was able to persuade and make them all understand that even though, Oklahoma State hates Oklahoma, Texas, Baylor and them are pissed off. Everybody's mad, right? Texas Tech and all these guys are all pissed off at OU and Texas, right? Okay, fine. Be mad. I get it. And I'm mad at them too. But here's what we can do. Let's make a little money off of it. We need to get them out so that we can get a clean break. He was able to make them all understand that. Kliavkoff hadn't been able to do that once, right? This idea that, and the other part that I loved about this was like, they're the chairman of the entire thing. So they're the ones that are going to come up with the whole grant of rights thing. So they're on board. Your ass. No, they're not. They're not on board. And let me tell you why they're not on board. They're not presenting shit. If they were on board with this deal, if they were on board with this deal and this grant of rights, then it had already have been done. Would it not have? If they didn't already have a foot out the door just waiting for the Big Ten to say, hey, come on. Don't you think maybe that's why there hasn't been a deal out there yet? Because
Well, yeah, because the Big Ten knows that the Pac-12 has no leverage. Oregon and Washington have no leverage. So it's a waiting game. And that's even more reason why I think that the conversation about the 4 corner schools is legitimate, right? It's not just posturing. It's not just the Big 12 wanting hopes and wishes to grow more. It's, at the end of the day, how long is this conference going to continue to be
How long are
relevant?
you going to Greg Fluglauer keeps talking about the guys, the Arizona State folks from the board, right, that continues to say, hey, look, we are not going to be held hostage by Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal.
Right.
We're not. If this doesn't get better for us, we're out. Right. And now it's
right. I mean, that's the thing. Pac-12 people want them to do nothing, and they expect them to do nothing.
Exactly. All right. Yeah. So let me see. Let's get back.
Oh yeah, you got to wait. You haven't even got to his fun little cutesy charts yet.
Yeah, they're fun.
Notice the Pac-12 did not allow the commissioner to use the title commissioner until 1986.
This
because
part
he was
is
not the
ridiculous.
guy in charge. the presidents were in charge. And there's a big mindset difference that Big 12 fans do not understand. That there's a big mindset difference that Big 12 fans do not understand. That the Pac
Big 12 fans don't understand. It isn't about the fans, you knucklehead. This is about the difference. The difference is he keeps acting like the fans have any power in this even. They don't.
Everybody in the Big 12 went to the school for kids who can't read good.
It's not as if fans have anything to do with it anyway. What are we talking about? It doesn't even make sense. Irritating.
12 answers to the presidents. So if the presidents, there's particularly in the Pac-12 and the Ivy League who don't, they very much, it's not just that they're sort of oversight. For example, the way that the Big 12 is always like putting out press releases and pumping it up and putting the commissioner front and center. The commissioner uses the phrase "I." The Pac-12 commissioner, other than maybe Larry Scott for a couple years before he got fired, don't use the fifth in the Big 12. Again, it's very much like the Ivy League does this too. Like, do you guys know the out there doing it?
Bro, you ain't the Ivy League, Tony. You are not the Ivy League.
I'm gonna say, you know who that guy reminds me of? He reminds me of Tweety Bird mixed with Ricky Bobby, who don't know what to do with his hands.
Yeah, dude. Hey, listen, the bottom line is, first off, Tony, stop. Somebody needs to tell you this. The Pac-12 is not the Ivy League, okay? The only two schools, and something that you probably didn't see in this because I think we moved ahead of it, right off the bat, Spencer McLaughlin says that he doesn't understand the whole AAU part of this when it comes to Oregon. He's an Oregon alum, by the way. And he's like, I don't even know how we became AAU. Right? He doesn't look at it as a big deal. And I can tell you that even if you want to say, yes, Arizona's an AAU and so is Arizona State. Okay, good. So is Utah, and they love to try to tell you how they're Stanford now. They're ranked 101 in the country. You're not. Okay? You're just not. So hush with that.
Well, and they act like that there's not an exorbitant number of R1 research institutions already in the Big 12.
Yeah, and no, it's
like
the
they
AAU,
act like we have
the
no
AAU
idea.
The AAU is a club. So the best I heard this explained was it's like being in the Rotary. Okay, if you become a Rotary member, right? You apply for it, you become a member. Now you're a Rotary guy. And it's the same with the AAU. And I've said this to you before, and I've said this to a lot of people before, but like I start thinking of Texas, right? And like Baylor and UT, they are part of what's called the Texas Medical Health System, okay? Or the Texas Health System, whatever it's called. They don't give a shit about the AAU because the AAU doesn't matter. They don't, if they wanted to be AAU, they'd be in it. They don't need it. They do research. And they do plenty of it. And I'm going to tell you that two of the best medical schools in the country are UT and Baylor. Another really good medical school in the country, Oklahoma. And look, Kansas too. Now they are AAU. They are AAU, but that
right.
They're AAU because they're in the Midwest. The reason they did that is because they're in the Midwest. So they are already doing, while playing in the Big 12, mind you, they are already doing research with those Big 10 country schools. Just so you know.
Yeah.
Because that's where they're in the area.
Yeah, no,
It's silly talk. This is all silly talk, folks. And so to sit here and act like you cannot. Okay, so this is where it starts getting into the part that really starting to bug a lot of people. And it's what bugs a lot of Big 12 fans. We see it all the time. You hear it from knuckleheads like Monty and this guy that are constantly going to bring up all of this stuff that has nothing to do with nothing. Okay. It's always about Big 12 fans with him. You're right. As opposed to the rest of the Power 5, except for the Big 10. Constantly comparing the Pac-12 to the Ivy League. You're not an Ivy League team, okay? You're not an Ivy League conference. There's two schools that are even comparable to the Ivy League. And you know what? Stanford got turned down. You admit that yourself in here. Stanford got turned down by the Ivy League before. So they're not part of the Ivy League either, all right? Get over yourself. Good grief. All right. Continuing. Boy.
Particularly supported by Cal and Washington. And so there are tens of millions of dollars of impact of if they were to even consider moving a conference, that, this stuff is just kind of a rounding error.
So Tony, I have a question for you.
$5 million
on
is
that front.
not a rounding error. I think that's unfair.
And again, it's not just
Out
about
of the
money.
$9.3 billion budget?
Well, hold on. I think what Josh is getting at was the question that I was wanting to ask, which is when you're talking about, the $5 million versus $9.3 billion, how readily, let's say that the media deal comes out and it's, $4 million less. How easily can the University of Washington, which does have a big endowment and does have a big operating budget and whatnot, move dollars around to make up that gap compared to?
Let me tell you how readily available that is. Not at all. One thing doesn't have anything to do with the other, Tony. One thing has nothing to do with the other. And you'll notice that, let me show you how he answers this.
Schools are getting, because the money goes to the athletic department.
In the last documented year, Washington's fundraising was $780 or something million.
Right, but what
The average
percentage
small
is
school was under
Athletic
100.
department.
But how much of that gets into the athletic department? Because I think in principle, schools like Oregon and Washington, can raise more money than in Arizona and Arizona State. So a $5 million gap to them is not going to be as significant. But for others,
So you notice he has no answer. He has no answer. You know why? Because what did I just say? That money is not, one thing is not for the other. Okay. The money that they raise for their academics and research and whatever, their endowment, none of that is for your athletic department. And it doesn't go there. It doesn't. Just like AAU money does not go to your athletic department. Just like listen, Kansas is in the Big 12. They are in the AAU also. They do research with Big 10 schools. They could do research out on the West Coast if they wanted to. Why don't they? It's a long ways away. That's why. Okay. They're in the Midwest. They can be around those other AAU schools. That's why they're in it. But it doesn't have anything to do with the Big 12 athletic conference. So one thing doesn't have anything to do with the other. Again, this is precisely the reason, Cody, that the connection between athletic conference dollars and academics is largely non-existent. And we keep talking about this. It's a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale.
Yeah, but I think it's at least fair to say that it did used to exist, right? The AAU accreditation used to be like,
no, it still
a very
matters
big
for
deal.
your school.
And if you
It
didn't
still
have
matters
it-
for your school, bro. But it doesn't have anything to do with where you play sports.
doesn't have nothing to do with
No.
realignment.
No,
It has nothing to do with NIL, which is
you're
what
not
this
moving.
is all
You're not moving the
circling
University of Utah to downtown Dallas. You know what I'm saying? You're just not. So if you were, then I can see what you're talking about. But you don't. Your students are not now going to go to BYU or to Baylor.
Right.
Yeah, or
Automatically
now all of a
just pick
sudden, all your Utah students are now going to Oklahoma State. That's not what's going on.
Right.
And it continues to get convoluted and thrown into each other like it matters. And my question is why? Why do we continue to have these conversations about stuff that has nothing to do with it? I'll tell you why. Because they have nothing else. If you are still somebody that I know that's close to the situation, I'm not going to say where. What she told me was this: if they're still holding on to AAU or academic money that's getting, spent, funding, whatever. If you're still, this is a direct quote, if you're still holding on to that life raft, that means you have no other reason for the Pac-12 to stay together.
Yep.
Okay.
And I've made this distinction before. It's a sinking ship, like
And
the
whether or
Pac-12
not-
is. And you're right. I do get flack occasionally because I go too
Listen,
hard
and I
on
understand
the
that,
Pac-12.
but the point being is that it's not even whether, and again, I can tell you that I don't want to see the Pac-12 fail. I think that I'm like a lot of people of, look, I'm having to get my head around this whole realignment deal as well. But realignment's been around for a long time. But that being said, is like where it's headed now is a fundamental change from what we are used to as college football fans. Okay, college sports fans in general, right? This is not the same thing. Hell, they're basically, the Rose Bowl is not going to ever be what it used to be, right? It's never.
Well, I mean, even the Big 12, if you date back, the Big 12 started as the Missouri Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Association in 1907. And then it went to the Big 6, it went to the Big 7, and then it split in the Missouri Valley Conference. Right. You know what I mean?
And then you have the Southwest Conference, and the Big 8 went together to become the Big 12.
It's not new. And dude, we had schools like Drake and Grinnell in the Big 12 at one point in time too back then, right? So conference realignment is not new. It's not going anywhere. The difference is now it's not about the universities. Now it's about the dollar bills that can be provided for universities. So the landscape has shifted entirely on its head since 1907. Yeah, you're right. It's not new, but this new version of it makes the academia side not irrelevant, but by any stretch. But
it's not irrelevant. And here's the deal. Here's the bottom line is that it's just not relevant to the athletic stuff. Because you've got guys like Altimore out here throwing out these figures as if they're actually part of this equation, right? I keep seeing him throw up faculty numbers, what they're making in the faculty over here versus what they're making in the Big 12. None of that. What does that have to do with anything? Here's the deal. This is the last part that we really have to say about this part is if those numbers, if the money that you're raising for your AAU or for your research dollars or whatever it is, your medical research or, your medical school, right? If any of that could be used for your athletic programs or was tied to your athletic programs in any way, shape, or form, staying in the Pac-12, then wouldn't they have already just taken the lowball offer from ESPN and moved on? I mean, because none of these schools are short on endowment funds, including the Arizona schools that Spencer keeps trying to act like they're so poor. They're not, by the way. They're not. They may not be as rich as some of them. They're not poor, right? They have endowments too. It's completely disingenuous is what I'm getting at, okay? Whether via AAU or alumni gatherings or away functions, which is the next thing they're going to start talking about, throwing all this stuff into the same category as your athletic media rights and the significance that holds on a school in the Pac-12 is asinine. And none of it doesn't have anything to do with the other one. Because, let me say.
Well, and the irony, bro, is when they talk crap about the Big 12, right? Like you mentioned, the flyover state, truck stop conference, all that fun jazz. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Arizona a land-grant school? Isn't Arizona State predicated upon agriculture as well? So you're throwing shade at people in your conference, yet you're expecting them to stay.
Yeah, and I mean, again, Utah continues to act like they're Stanford now because they've done a little research with Stanford.
They do.
But you're not. You're still ranked number 101 in the country at overall. Okay?
Their fans think they went to Stanford.
They didn't. And listen, for that matter, I mean, you start looking at BYU, that theology school is one of the toughest schools in the country. Period. Whether you like LDS or whatever, doesn't matter. That's one of the toughest schools in the country. I'm going to tell you about Baylor's theology school. The Baptist, one of the toughest in the country.
TCU?
Same with TCU. Right. These are smart. And Baylor also has one of the best medical schools in the Southwest. Period.
Well, did you saw on Oklahoma State the new rendering of the new facilities we're building? You heard about the medical facility that's going to be part of that? So we're trying to get it to where we can do surgeries.
You're gonna
right there
and
on-
it's gonna
on
end
campus
up
in the
being
middle of-
a tier 1 research school as well. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Continuing.
Schools, like the Arizona schools, for instance, it might not be quite as easy to do that. So how
Here,
how
let's take a
easily
look
can
at
that money
fundraising.
get shifted?
You know, according to Stuart Mandel, Pac-12 presidents were a bit too optimistic, and they're sitting there. They don't have a deal, and according to reporting as well, multiple of these schools have had conversations with the Big 12. So it's not chump change. This is conversations happening in the room. We're not in those rooms, but they are conversations happening. That is why we're talking about it. The money is significant for the athletics.
Yeah, I believe we're getting to the crux of why there are divisions among that is significant, that we're going to get $40 million per year for our football program versus $28 million per year. That's the big question for me.
But it all ties together because, and here's why. Your athletics, football is the front, and basketball even for that matter, is the front porch to your university. And it ties into attendance, it ties into how many students you get into your school, and that all ties into the money for the university. And you can't tell me a lot of these donors aren't sports fans. And if your sports team if they suck or they're not happy with what's going on, then they could very well say, I'm not giving money to the engineering department or whatever. So I understand they're separate. I mean, I understand that there's an academic piece, but at the end of the day, football is driving
Here's the annual fundraising
a huge
number.
portion of, I'm not finished talking. It's driving a huge portion of
Sorry,
of the economics of the universities. I'm done now.
I think you're totally right, Couz, and that's
But I'm done.
Couz is my dude. But
Dude, I flipping love
yeah,
Couz,
and so
man.
here it says, you see this, look at this headline. Most Pac-12 schools significantly out fundraise all Big 12 schools. All right. Again,
Based off
right,
of
and it gets pointed out by Josh here in just a second. I'm almost done with this whole thing. I don't even know that we need to go back to this video. Essentially, Joshua is going to point out on there that a lot of this has to do, and by the way, both of Josh's parents are doctors. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I didn't know that
I did
either.
not know that. And I've been on your show.
So apparently,
Cool.
so, you know, and a lot of the difference in that graph that you're seeing, watch, let me pull it back up. But this, this graph here, you're seeing that you've got 1.28 billion, 1.1 billion for Cal and Stanford and their fundraising, correct? Yeah, I get it. 711 million for Washington, obviously Colorado 312, Utah 2 something or whatever. But obviously it's ahead. Okay. Now you see that Kansas breaks in here in front of Arizona. Iowa State actually does a very good job in the Big 12. But see, I don't believe that I'm going to tell you that Baylor's fundraising this says includes adjacent university medical schools up at the top, right? This is a 2020 report, by the way. So, again, this is what I was talking about. This is a disingenuous conversation, man, because of the fact that, and as Josh will point out to you, none of that money they are not sharing that medical school fundraising with the football team. They're not. Right. It's absolutely not happening. So whether or not the fundraising, I don't care what the numbers are. I really don't care, because the bottom line is whatever the number is, and I don't even know that the ones in the Big 12 is correct or not correct. I don't know. I don't trust anything that Altimore says. So my thoughts are that they didn't add that medical school stuff for Baylor and Texas. No way. Because if they did, then it would be more. So the bottom line is simple. I'm just going to say this. I don't care what the number is. None of that money goes to the football program. And if it did, then the deal would have been done a year ago. We wouldn't still be talking about any of this. We'd be on to the next thing. And that's the whole point. Guys, I appreciate the fact that you did a debate about this. And I appreciate the fact that everybody wants to throw shade on each other. And honestly, I feel badly for the Pac-12 that I do feel like whether it's today, tomorrow, or 5 years down the line, I think your conference is toast. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you've got, number one, a commissioner that has no, I'm not saying power, but not ability to persuade, right? He has none. And he's made misstep after misstep after misstep, and nobody's paying attention to him, nor do they care. On the other hand, you have Brett Yormark and really before Yormark ever got there could have not been a conference. Bob Bowlesby screwed that up so badly over the last 10, 12 years that it should have been a dead conference.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Kliavkoff allowed it to stay alive. And not just Kliavkoff. You want to talk about who was in charge of that conference? Yeah, the president.
You got to give Bowlesby props for landing the 4 new schools to breathe.
Reactively. Okay, great.
Yeah, no, he
should have happened. He could have done that shit a long time before.
And I agree, but I'm just saying he did stop the bleeding and give the opportunity for Brett Yormark to take over.
It would have not happened had Kliavkoff been able to talk USC, UCLA, and the rest of those schools into adding those schools from the Big 12 before he added the other ones. Because he had the opportunity. The Pac-12 had the opportunity to add Oklahoma State and Kansas and Texas Tech and all them before the Big 12 added the new schools that they've got coming in this year.
Yeah, Bob Bowlesby just sat on his hands.
He was lucky. He was lucky.
The appeal of OU
he was lucky that Kliavkoff he can't talk anybody into anything. Okay, that's what he's lucky at.
George Kliavkoff should have ended the Big 12
exactly.
2 years ago.
That's the point I'm making. And so the bottom line is all this. Look, all this ancillary talk is just that. Now, whether or not you live, and I'm not saying that I'm hoping death upon anybody. What I do see is that this is going to happen, and whether it happens this time around or not, what I would tell you is that I feel like the only thing keeping you alive is the Big Ten not really being ready. If you listen to what Jim Williams was saying, through his tweets the last few days, the people that he knows in the Big Ten are saying, we're going to kind of wait this out and see what happens with SC and UCLA. Right now, they're the ones that are going to have to do a lot of traveling. When it comes to basketball and stuff, each of our programs are going to go and we're going to stay 3 days in LA, play both teams, and then move on, right? We don't know that we want to keep them out going back and forth to the West Coast. We're going to have to see how this goes. Now, if the Four Corners schools were to jump, or 2 of them were to jump, or even 1 of them, then that could change things because it could set off a chain reaction that causes everything, right?
Right.
In any event, this idea that you continue to see on Twitter, and Tony Altimore likes to sit there and talk about that these people on Twitter don't know anything. Well, you're one of those people on Twitter talking the most, buddy. And everything you're saying, it's just you speak in, and I had the argument with him on Twitter the other day. He keeps speaking in certainties of this is the way it's going to be, and definitively saying there's none of them are going to join the Big 12. None of them are going to do this. None of them are going to do that. Well, I think that's wishful thinking. And for you to sit there and speak like you actually know when you have nothing to back any of it up. But yet later on in this, and this is what really pissed off neighbors and really me too, Dennis Dodd gets brought up as, that he's reporting this and that. And he called him the National Enquirer. And
Dennis
drug him under the bus.
From CBS Sports.
Same one. Andrew Marchand, same kind of stuff. Nobody wants to hear these guys. You've got guys like this that you're calling out respected journalists for the last 3 decades. He blew off Jim Williams the other day and was basically telling him he was wrong. Jim Williams has won 7 Emmy Awards as a broadcaster.
Yeah, I'm sure he has
none.
No
he knows
connections.
Nothing, according to Altimore. Guys, I understand that you don't want to lose your conference. I get it. Yeah,
we've been there. We were just there.
Exactly.
We get it.
But the bottom.
But don't act so sanctimonious that you do it to yourself.
Yeah, listen, if you want to be pissed at somebody, first off, they ought to be pissed at the Big 10, not the Big 12. Secondly, stop lying to people and acting like they're a bunch of idiots because they don't agree. It's just almost like politics in this world right now.
I'm glad you brought that up. I totally forgot about that, but you just gave me a rush of memorization. Do you recall when USC and UCLA left, or they announced they were leaving the Pac-12? The next day, did George Kliavkoff come out and say anything bad about the Big Ten? No, not a single word. He instead wanted to start talking crap on the Big 12. It's like, why are you
the Big 12
mad at
trying
us
to destabilize us and lobbing grenades from every corner and all that talk? Yeah. It's odd.
After the Big Ten is just moved.
It's odd, isn't it? Look.
It's like we're living in crazy.
And they are. And that's the whole point that I'm making with this thing. It's the whole thing. And we need to wrap this up because we're going to end up going long.
Yeah. My old lady's gonna kill me.
Furthermore, most Pac-12s significantly out fundraise these schools. Are we really supposed to believe that this fundraising either is going to stop happening because you're playing in another conference? Let's just say, okay, I understand that a lot of times you've got a lot of alums that live in Chicago or New York or DC or wherever. So in the case that you might go to a Big 12, or like, for instance, SC used to, whenever they play every other year out in South Bend, then they spend time in Chicago, they fundraise, they do a lot of that stuff. Do you really believe, you want me to believe that they're going to stop having those fundraisers in New York and Chicago and DC because you're now in the Big 12? Because I'm going to.
Right. Or your alumni base is just going to stop.
Yeah, they're going to stop having these galas because, there's no football game anymore. What the hell are you talking about? Right? Yeah. I mean, none of that makes sense. It has zero to do with it. The bottom line is it has nothing to do with it. And on top of it, even if that did, here's the other part of it that is just as important is going to be your visibility, your ability to keep up. If you care about athletics, and I understand that Stanford may not, right? They may not.
Right.
If you care about athletics whatsoever, and you, as Oregon or as Washington, you want to compete for the national championship, something that Josh Pate said on his show on Sunday, do not tell me that this school out in the Pac-12 that is being significantly, destabilized, and no matter what happens, don't tell me that champion of that conference, whatever it looks like going forward, is going to be similar to the SEC runner-up or champion. It's not. Okay? It's not. It's going to be more along the lines of the AAC champion. Okay?
Right. Not even the ACC.
I said the AAC, the American Athletic Conference. Right.
I know.
Yeah.
So,
and maybe, it's not going to be on the level of the ACC. It's not even going to be on the level of the Big 12. Even without Oklahoma and Texas, it's not going to be on the level of the Big 12 because it's not. Listen, and I'm not even telling you that and listen, you're going to hear different from Cody. I'm going to tell you the Big 12, the Big 12 is in trouble right now unless they add some of these schools to bump up their football team. their football power. They need that. You need it as a collective. You need more. You would agree with that part of it, at least, right?
I think for future stability,
a team like Utah, a team like Colorado, the Arizona schools, maybe not, but a team like Coach Prime's Colorado Buffaloes isn't going to hurt you, right? A team like Coach Whittingham's Utah Utes, as loud as these folks are being, that having the holy war in the Big 12, it's good for business.
Dude, I was all about it. When I first heard about the Four Corner schools, that was the most I was excited for.
Absolutely.
Was the Holy War. Because in my opinion, the Holy War almost makes up for losing Bedlam, legitimately speaking. And then Utah fans and Utah prognosticators decided to continue to shove their nose up everybody's tuchus. And that's when I was like, why are these people acting
Bomber
like
keeps saying the Big 12 Mafia guy? I hope you're on him now. Big 12 Mafia. Who? Bomber Nathan Bomber Brown. If you're not already watching him, he's on Twitter too. He's been on a couple of shows with us and me and Couz as well. Check him out. He's a BYU guy. Absolutely. And he tells you that, like, look, this is a big time game, right? But here's what he will tell you, that he believes that Utah will not go to the Big 12 no matter what. They're going to wait. They're going to wait and pray that the Big 10 decides to pick them up at some point, which we know is not going to happen.
Oh, really?
Right?
Yeah. See, again,
I'm not saying it would be funny,
true. But it would be slightly ironic.
I'm telling you that's what Nathan thinks. I'm not telling you I believe that necessarily, because I think once you're really faced with the end of the conference, you got to figure out that if you enjoyed being a Power 5 school, you better get back into one. Otherwise, what do you got? The Mountain West?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Nope.
They didn't like the Mountain West before. That's where you're headed back to? I don't think so.
Oh, but that's exactly right. The Pac is turning into the WAC, and they're trying to publicly pretend that nothing's happening. Again, throw the blindfold over your eyes while your house is burning down, and let's just hope the fire department shows up in time to save some wood.
Not get me burned here. But the bottom line is that in the end, I'm going to just end it at this, folks. If you didn't watch this, go ahead and take a look at it. But I want you to look further than just myself. I would tell you this: look further than just what you want to have happen. Look at the obvious here. One thing doesn't have anything to do with the other. You're not getting anything of significance, and you have a bunch of mudslinging coming without much substance behind it from a guy like Tony Altimore. He doesn't know I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't. Neither does Tony Altimore. Neither does Cody, and neither does any of those guys that were involved in that show last night. We don't know for sure. Can you read the tea leaves and have an idea of what is going to happen down the line? You should be able to, but only if you're honest with yourself, and only if you look at what is real and don't listen to people like Tony Altimore, John Wilner, and John Canzano. That's the only way.
Well, and even like the Monty
show, don't listen to that knucklehead either.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird how they've all come together to pitch the same exact narrative. Honestly, like it cannot be by accident that they're all putting out the same stuff. Yeah. Meanwhile, all of the people at Fox and ESPN and all of these different conglomerates, they're like, no, we're out. So who are you lying to? You're lying to your own fans. And we're not saying that the Pac-12 is going to completely dissolve. It looks that way. It looks inevitable.
It may not be today. It may not be in this cycle even. It could be 5 years down the line for all we know. And even Jim Williams was saying, look, they want to stay together. That's clear. We see that. Now, now, how many of them actually want to stay together, whether or not? When the reason that he was talking bad about Dennis Dodd was Dennis Dodd is reporting that ESPN is out of the negotiations, period. Completely. Yep. Now Marshawn was on with Neighbors just a little while ago saying that he's not positive of that, that he doesn't like to say never, but he did say that it doesn't look good. And it hasn't looked good for a long time.
Right.
Him and John Oran have said the same thing. The same thing has come out of, Brett McMurphy. The same has another solid reporter. Marshawn and Oran, one works for the New York Post, one of the New York papers. These guys, and the Sports and Business Journal. I mean, these are reputable, real journalists.
Yeah.
Same with Jim Williams. This guy, again, broadcaster, director, the guy has produced and directed broadcast sports and won 7 Emmys doing it. He kind of knows how the inner workings go and who to talk to, right? There's a lot of these guys out there. Pete Thamel, he works for ESPN. He works for ESPN College Football. He might have an idea of what's going on within ESPN. Maybe. I don't know. It's just, here's the deal. Whether or not it ends up happening today or not, it's not even really what I would get at. I'm not wishing death on this. What I'm hoping for is that I don't want to see all these teams and programs that theoretically had an opportunity to win a college championship in football or basketball. I don't want to see that completely go away. And I think that that's what's about to happen. And that includes with Florida State and Clemson if something doesn't change pretty soon. Because of where the direction we're headed.
Yeah, ACC. Bro, there's not a school in the ACC that is happy about learning the fact that Cincinnati and Central Florida now make more money than they do. You know what I mean? And that is the problem with doing a bad contract. And I understand the Pac-12 is trying to avoid a bad contract, but they've put themselves in a position that they may only have.
Well, that's
one
the other part of it that
side.
we're running into right now is that, and they said that on the show too, is that right now you're in a time where there's just not a lot of. First off, there's not a bunch of money going around. The money that's going around is a lot, but there's less. I mean, ESPN's laying off a bunch of people right now. Fox, I don't know what's going on with that, but I mean, it's kind of shaky ground. There's a bit of a media recession happening right now when it comes to broadcast media. Mm-hmm. This is what the problem is. They have made missteps, and that's a shame. But the truth, there's been missteps made all the way back to Larry Scott. This isn't new for the Pac-12. And the fact that, he was talking about how different it is that these presidents are more in charge. Listen, that's not the case. They are not any more in charge than anywhere else in the country. The difference is that they are unpliable as presidents of that conference. And so.
Well, it's just like when you have managers, if you own a company, you're the owner, you make the decisions, but you need your managers to run things.
Of course,
the right way.
And in the end, it's the same concept. Everybody has fallen victim to this golden goose that's been laying all these eggs for all this time with the CFP, and now it's choking everybody out. There's only going to be so many people that are going to get to keep getting the golden egg. The deal that has been done with the devil is done. Okay, you can blame whoever you want to blame. But it's just as much the Pac-12's fault as it is the Big 12 and the SEC and the Big 10 and the ACC. They all swallowed this money up, and they gobbled it up and allowed these television networks to be in charge of the sport. It's like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Because here's the other thing. Let's say that, they do agree on a deal in principle. Right? Whatever it may be, I don't care. But if they were to do that, and then they say, but Oregon and Washington don't want to sign a grant of rights. In the end, whether or not this thing lands, I mean, however it lands, the problem is that it's already the toothpaste is out of the tube. You're not getting it back in. And so this idea that it's guaranteed they're all going to stay together. And this is about more than athletics. You keep hearing that. This is about more than athletics. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's really not. It really has nothing to do with anything but athletics. And
And every school has to hold academic
Duh.
standards, right?
Dude, they're not a school because of the football team. Even the best in the country are not colleges because they have a football team. That's not the only reason they have a school.
Right. Their acceptance and graduation rates are
In
still
fact,
going to
sports
play a
only
hand in
became
it.
a part of the university landscape to be something that makes your school visible and ups your enrollment. That's all it's about. And every time that you're on television and somebody gets to see that Oklahoma State video, that commercial, come be a poke, that's important. And that's what Couz said. This is your front porch of your university.
Right. Marketing matters.
And in the end, I know it's taken on a life of its own. There is money involved in it, and it's large amounts of money. And no, does it make as much money as your research dollars? No, it doesn't. But here's the beauty of it. It's not one or the other. It isn't one or the other.
Right,
so stop saying that it is. Stop believing that it is, folks. Stop letting these guys tell you lies and you gobble it up and you get pissed off at the Big 12 about it, or vice versa, Big 12 fan. Stop being mad at the Pac-12 fan.
Yeah.
They don't know any better because they're being fed this.
Correct.
That's where I'm at.
Yep, that is 100% accurate. I agree completely, brother man. I really, really, really do. And thank you very much for bringing me in for this conversation, because, I think my Locked On buddies handled themselves well. But you're right, man. Couz and Josh Neighbors, they ran that thing.
They did. Listen, and I was, as far as I wasn't super happy, as far as like, there was some times that I felt like Spencer was obviously fighting for his conference, and I understand it.
Correct.
But there was also times that he shut down what was coming out of Tony Altimore and it looked like he was on the right side of things. I don't know how often that happens. I'm not trying to badmouth anybody. And I would tell you that I'm not trying to badmouth Tony Altimore, but that's a lie. I don't like him. I think he's full of shit. And so
well, it's just like, I think with you view things, unless I'm wrong, you view things from almost a lens of respect, right? Respect your job, respect your craft, respect your school, respect your fan base, respect
and have some integrity. Have some integrity.
That's what it all leads to. If you don't respect what you do, you don't respect your research, you don't respect your fan base, then your integrity clearly is on display. And that's where I feel bad for some of the Pac-12
Listen, and that's what I feel bad about. I think that it's wrong that we're continually talking about this stuff that doesn't matter, and that you have people like him. And even what bothers me even more, I don't think that he's not a journalist. So whatever. But you're going to sit there and badmouth a journalist that I respect, and most of the country does, Dennis Dodd, among others, plenty of others. I'm just talking about last night. He equated Dennis Dodd to the National Enquirer. That was wrong. So I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of you. And so, and the same goes for John Wilner and John Canzano, who I used to believe were pretty stand-up dudes. Not so much anymore.
They're just paid mouthpieces
and it's sad.
Anymore, Bubba.
That's what's sad. And the hardest thing about that is that you have this group of people that are Pac-12 fans that are buying into what they're saying, and they're gonna forever be and what they're doing. If they do end up, you say Utah fan, what kind of hell are they going to go through for the first few years if they end up in the Big 12 because of all these guys?
Oh, bro. Oh, man. That is one thing I will say. If Utah does come to the Big 12, they will automatically become the new Texas. Everybody's going to be like, wait, what?
That's harsh. Yeah.
What? They're going to become the new Texas without the money and prestige of Texas.
or even the school that Texas is, My goodness. Okay.
Hey, man, the 40 acres it's a powerful, majestic unicorn.
Listen, it's a first-class university, okay? As much as I hate Texas too, I do.
Right.
You can't really talk bad about the education that you get there.
I hate Texas, but I love playing them in football.
Yeah. Well, you have won 6 out of 10. You know, it's not like going up against Oklahoma.
Dude, we've done like 8 of the last. Yeah, okay. You know what? I shouldn't have said anything just so you could throw that, but that's fair. I opened the door. All right. Yes, we lose Bedlams like it's going out of style, but we also treat Texas like a redheaded stepchild for you in return.
I'm glad you do. Folks, I don't know that. I hope that you got something out of this. In any event, make sure you go check that out. If you're not already a subscriber to my channel, please make sure that you do. If you're not already a subscriber to Cody's channel, he is on the way to 1,000. We're getting close for him. What's the number today?
720.
It's time to get him over that 1,000 person mark.
Well, I mean, I jumped into this 5 months ago.
That's very fast. It's very fast, but it's time to get you there.
We're getting there.
That's right about the time. I mean, if you can make it within the next month, then you will beat my time, which is 6 months. Okay. So yeah, I was right around 6 months to get to 1,000. I want you to do the same. Folks, make sure that you get out there and hit that like button. The main thing is like as I said, you can always support the show with tips. Either through the super chat heart. We have Cash App, Venmo. You can, and obviously make sure that all of Cody's sponsors, make sure you are using those guys. What is it? Go ahead. I'll let you give the sponsors here in a second. For myself,
bro, FanDuel and Built Bar are killing it for us right now. So we're leaning heavy with FanDuel and Built Bar at the moment.
That's awesome. You can also buy podcast merchandise from my site right at the address below. And then the Fanatics partnership as well. That's always a way to help us out. But here's a free way to do it. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure that you comment and share with somebody else. If you do that, it's massive for us as content creators. So we would appreciate that. And again, thanks a lot for joining the show. Cody, it was good working with you again. I enjoy it every time. We will definitely see you on the next one. And folks, we will see you on the next one. Have a good one.
Crazy.
Hey, you guys all know the drill, right? Say it with me. Smash that red subscriber button. Like our videos. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you don't miss one moment of the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. Hey, we even have amazing pod merchandise right here in our store. Hey, while you're here, don't forget to check out all these other amazing channels and subscribe to them too.